I actually wanted to use like cool Star Wars music for this intro, but I got kind of worried that like the YouTube copyright ninjas would come after. Whoa, 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 whoa! Guys! I know how to solve this. Look. Here, take this. It's a card to a family counselor. Go down the street, take a left, keep going. You can't miss it. It should prevent, like, the next galaxy-wide war and hopefully another bad movie. Okay, so if you're one of like the 3 people who regularly watch my videos, then odds are you're thinking to yourself, Am I in the right channel? This isn't his usual kind of content. Well, don't worry, this is the same introspection that's been filling you in on information and philosophy up to this point. But I figured during these rather confusing and stressful times, it'd be a good idea to talk about something a little bit more upbeat and fun. But don't worry, I still intend on including a little bit of philosophy in this video. So, now for the question, does he really actually like Jar Jar? Is there such a weird and confused person out in the world? Well, yes, I do like Jar Jar. Now, before you go into the comments calling me a tasteless idiot, just hear me out for a sec, okay? I do have some reasoning behind this. Okay, so let's start out with what kind of character is Jar Jar? What's the purpose of Jar Jar? Well, Jar Jar is really meant to be a comedic relief character. Now, these characters tend to be really goofy, not always, but a lot of the time they are. This makes them very memorable characters from whatever TV show or movie they're from. Now, a lot of the time they'll end up messing something up because they're so goofy, but usually using that same, goofiness, they'll end up fixing it. Most of the time by accident, but the point is that this kind of thing serves as comedic relief and makes these very memorable characters. Characters like this include Louis from Ant-Man, Dorothy from Finding Nemo, Donkey from Shrek, Mater from Cars, Pinto and Raggedy from Pirates of the Caribbean, Michelangelo from TMNT, Darcy from Thor, even though nobody knows her, which is really wrong because she's one of the best characters in any Thor movie. Anyways, moving on. The point being is that these characters, along with many others, are comedic relief characters. Now, the big obvious difference between these characters and Jar Jar is that most people, at the very least, like most of these characters, but hate Jar Jar. But why is that? Why do people dislike Jar Jar so much? Well, I don't think it's because of his character. Let's just break down his character and see how it's really comprised. In terms of intelligence, he's like Dorothy. In terms of goofiness, he's like Mater. And in terms of childlike personality, maybe not quite there, but he's pretty close to Michelangelo. I think from just a structural point of view, just looking at his character without the story around him, he's not bad. If you watch him, he does that role pretty well. I think the problem was more that he was crammed into a movie like trying to cram a cylinder into a triangle-shaped hole, and not only that, but the movie he was being crammed into, nobody liked to begin with. So the fact that he was kind of crammed into a role that didn't fit him in a movie that nobody liked made him one of the most disliked people or characters of a movie that most people disliked to begin with. Now, admittedly, I don't really mind the prequels. I don't love them, but I didn't think they were horrific. I especially liked the pod racing scene where you see Anakin racing for the prize and he gets thrown up into the air and he does some sort of adjustment and he lands back perfectly so that he can win the race. But I'm getting off topic. The point being is that I don't think it's so much that Jar Jar is a bad character. I think that he was a good character but put in a very bad situation. Now, this isn't actually how I was introduced to Jar Jar. The way that I was introduced to Jar Jar, and actually just all of Star Wars, was Star Wars The Clone Wars. Now, I've seen all of the movies. I definitely really liked the originals, liked parts of the prequels. I am not really a big fan of most of the most recent movies, but point being, for me, not only was the introduction to the Star Wars galaxy through Star Wars The Clone Wars, it's actually one of the things I like most about the Star Wars galaxy. In fact, if I'm being honest with you, I actually liked the TV show a lot more than any of the movies. I felt like the story was a lot more fleshed out. Because of that, I had a better chance of connecting to the characters much more than I did during any of the movies. A lot of new characters were introduced that definitely deserve a place in the Star Wars galaxy, but because of how the movies were laid out, they didn't get a chance to be featured in the actual movies. So yeah, I generally like that TV show, and I think most people would agree that it's a really good TV show. They might not say that it's better than the movies, but generally speaking in the community, from what I've seen personally, they're like, yeah, it's a pretty good TV show and it does the source material justice. So why am I going on and on and on about Star Wars The Clone Wars? Well, don't worry, there's a point to this. See, like I mentioned earlier, this is where I was personally introduced to Jar Jar, and this is probably why I wasn't one of the people who really disliked Jar Jar. See, in this TV show, Jar Jar has a chance to do what he was actually meant to do. This is what happens when you put a cylinder through a circle hole, essentially. Jar Jar actually has a chance to do what all of these other characters, Dorothy, Mater, so on, had a chance to do in their TV show or movie. During this TV show, you see that Jar Jar is a very lovable character. People respond to him in that movie as a very lovable character. That's the other thing. Like, most of the characters in the movie didn't even like Jar Jar, and the few that didn't really get a chance to show their affection for Jar Jar. Which is another reason I kind of think a lot of people didn't really like Jar Jar. I don't know how anybody expected anyone else to like Jar Jar if the people in the movie didn't even like Jar Jar. But in this movie, everybody to a degree likes him, or if they're annoyed, they're just annoyed that he's a goofball and he kind of gets in people's way, but he's kind of like that lovable idiot. That guy who's like really silly, but we love him anyways, especially Padme. Padme just adores Jar Jar to a degree. And all the other characters really like him as well for the previously explained reasons. He's the lovable idiot. And because of this, along with adjustments in the story, Jar Jar gets the chance to do what he was actually meant to do. He gets to be the comedic relief. When he shows up, there's a reason for him to show up. When something happens, he reacts appropriately. When he messes up, there's a reason for that, and it actually contributes to the story. And when he fixes something, he fixes it like a comedic relief person would. So he gets the chance to really be what he was meant to be. And because this was my exposure to Jar Jar, I think I was really able to see Jar Jar as an individual character. And I think when you separate him into an individual character, he's a very well-made character. He does what a lot of these other comedic relief characters do. He pretty much meets all the criteria to be considered at the very least decent, although in my opinion, very well made comedic relief character. It's more that, again, the situation and the movie that he was put in was just not good. He wasn't really there for a reason. They kind of just tossed him in. And when they tossed him in, they kind of just had to like rewire and replumb and try to mess with things to try to make it so that it kind of makes sense that he's there, and even then, there's not really too much of a reason for him to be there. And the sad thing to me is that I think when a musician or an actor or whoever does a really good job, I think they deserve credit where credit's due. And when it comes to these kinds of actors, usually they do get that kind of credit. People like Robert Downey Jr. because he was a really good Iron Man. People like Tom Holland because he was a really good Spider-Man. People like Johnny Depp because he did a really good Jack Sparrow. And don't get me wrong, these actors have also had other positions where they've been in, and they've also done really well in a lot of those positions as well. But the point being is that they got credit where credit's due because they were really good actors. And yes, Jar Jar is a CGI character, but you gotta remember, even though he was a CGI character, somebody was still playing him. And I think that Ahmed Best, I think that's how you pronounce his name, did a really good job with the situation he was put in. But people hated Jar Jar so much and kept telling him so often that he was actually contemplating suicide. He was at the brink of killing himself. Now, yes, there's an argument to be made that you kind of need to be prepared for a certain degree of backlash whenever you enter the public eye. Although his character was Jar Jar, so I certainly wouldn't be surprised if he got way more hatred and toxicity in comparison to other actors, and maybe even other actors who played roles that most people don't like. But point being is that is how much people disliked his character. And again, I don't think that's justified because I think for the reasons I've spent like the past 9 minutes telling you about, it was a good character. But he didn't get the credit he deserved like most other actors do when they do a good job. So, I'm kind of hoping to at least plant the idea that maybe Jar Jar isn't as terrible as most people think. I'm not trying to convince you that he's like the best character that's ever been produced in Star Wars or anything like that. We all know that's probably R2-D2. Let's be real. It's R2-D2. But what I am trying to say is that, like, for what he had and the kind of character that he was a pretty good one. It's just the situation. And I'm sure at this point I've probably repeated it ad nauseum, but I just wanted to share with you why I think this actor deserves a little bit more credit and why I think Jar Jar is not that bad of a character. And hopefully I've at least gotten you to consider that maybe you should give Jar Jar a second chance. Now for the philosophy part that I'm sure a lot of you have forgotten that I promised at the beginning of the video. There is another reason why I really like Jar Jar. If you notice, the 3 prequels all had a very serious tone to them. It made it so that, most of it was either drama or politics. Politics is probably one of the main reasons people didn't really like the prequels, and that's pretty understandable. That's not exactly what we want to talk about when we're trying to escape the outside world for 2.5 hours. But point being is that the majority of them are really, really serious. But throughout them, Jar Jar manages to maintain his goofiness, which I find to be a really good symbolism for something. And I'm sure that the writers really weren't going for this kind of thing. If they were, I would be very impressed and have a new appreciation for the prequels. But there's a good chance they probably weren't thinking about it like this. But regardless, this is how I kind of like to look at it. The 3 prequels being so serious and Jar Jar still maintaining his goofiness for the most part is a good symbolism of how serious and daunting life can kind of get, but still maintaining that small bit of joy or childlike happiness or goofiness is very important to continue. It's very important we have that, because if we don't, we kind of just die inside, to put it bluntly. So this is kind of like the symbolism I tend to draw from the prequels. And again, wouldn't be surprised if this isn't at all what the writers were going for. Would be impressed if they were, but point being, this is what Jar Jar can represent to me from time to time. One of the reasons I kind of really like Jar Jar. And I think that proves to be even more important now than before, because now we're in this situation where a lot of us are kind of flipping out a little bit, and we're kind of going stir crazy, but it's important that we maintain that little Jar Jar inside of ourselves, believe it or not, to kind of stay sane. Which I know is weird for those of you who are driven insane by Jar Jar, but it serves as a good symbolism for the kind of thing that we have to try to maintain at the moment. One more thing I want to say before I end this video. Mr. Best, on the very, 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 very slim chance, by some miracle, you actually find and watch this video, I want you to know that I'm a huge fan, as I hope is evident by the past 12 minutes and 30 seconds of me not shutting up. And I also want you to know that even though a lot of other people will very, very strongly disagree with me, Jar Jar is actually one of my personal favorite characters of all of Star Wars, just because I really like him. And I just wanted you to know that. And if, hey, you want to do an interview on the channel, that would be awesome. Or I certainly wouldn't say no to an autograph. I'm going to shut up now because I'm pretty sure in the past 10 to 12 seconds, I made myself look like a fanboy idiot. Well, I think that'll just about wrap up this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you guys want to talk more Star Wars, head down to the comment section below. Just please don't hate me for liking Jar Jar. Otherwise, make sure to hit that subscribe button, like button, and bell button. I post every other week. May the Force be with you. Hear nothing and listen to all. Bye, guys.